What if you could walk into a room and already know which door will lead to fortune and which will lead to ruin, not because you've read the future, but because you've already lived it once before? Imagine a system that let you trade on yesterday's markets as if they were today's, turning hindsight into a currency that never loses its value. What if that system slipped into the hands of an ordinary accountant who's barely scraping by? And what if, in the rush to make a living, he found that the price of money was more than just numbers on a screen? It was the very shape of society itself. Ethan Sullivan was 34 and living on a budget that was thin as the paper on which he balanced his books. He sat behind a fluorescently lit desk in the back office of a small auditing firm, the clatter of keys echoing off the walls of a cramped apartment above. The rent was high, the credit card bill was overdue, and the only thing steady in his life was the rhythm of his spreadsheets. He'd always dreamed of a bigger life, but the world of numbers was a maze he could never quite navigate out of. One rain-shrouded Thursday, while waiting for a coffee at the corner cafe, he noticed a man in a rain-slick trench coat with an old watch that ticked in reverse. The stranger glanced at Ethan's stack of papers, as if reading his future, and muttered, "Time is a loop, not a line." The words vanished into the drizzle before Ethan could ask who he was. Later that night, a folded paper slipped out of the back of a library book about economic history. On it, in a cramped hand, was a single sentence: "Yesterday's markets are today's gold. Use the loop to arbitrage the past." Ethan's heart hammered. The idea was absurd, almost a joke. Yet the phrase "use the loop" felt like a key turned in a lock he hadn't known existed. He stared at the sentence until his eyes blurred, and then, curiosity gnawed, he pocketed the note and slipped out of the library. That night, with the city's neon glow seeping through his blinds, he typed "time loop arbitrage" into the search bar. The results were a swirl of forums, broken links, and a single thread that led to a forum post from a user named Kronos, describing a method to backdate trades using a proprietary algorithm. The post ended with a line that felt like a dare: "If you read this, the loop is open." Ethan's fingers trembled as he replied with a single question: "How does it work?" The reply came a week later, a link to a private GitHub repository filled with code and documentation. The message was short, almost cryptic: "You have the power. Use it responsibly. The loop has a cost." The next morning, after he had already paid the electric bill and filed his tax returns, Ethan opened the repository. He didn't understand all the lines of code, but a few key functions caught his eye: simulate past, execute future, and adjust market. The algorithm seemed to predict market behavior by referencing historical data, then apply those predictions as if they were current. It was as if the code had the power to step into a time capsule and bring the past to life. The code also contained a warning: each execution alters the probability space. The system is not immune to self-consistency paradoxes. Ethan's first test was modest. He bought a single share of a small tech company whose stock had fallen to a 5% low. His algorithm, simulating the market a week earlier, predicted a modest surge, and Ethan placed a buy order at the low price. The following day, the stock rose 12%. The thrill was electric, but he kept the gains in a separate account, the money quiet and unseen. He worked on the system for weeks, buying and selling in micro trades that seemed almost effortless. He was not a genius at coding, he was a diligent accountant who could read numbers. The algorithm did most of the heavy lifting. As his account grew, the line between desperation and opportunity blurred. He began to sleep less, his thoughts filled with the rhythm of trades that were both past and present. The first major twist came one night when a sudden market dip caused a ripple effect across several indices. Ethan watched as the algorithm meant to correct the market inadvertently caused a short-term sell-off that hurt a small investment fund. He stared at the numbers. The loop had not been a neutral tool, it had become a lever that could push the market into uncharted territory. He realized the system was a double-edged sword. Each profitable trade was a slice of a knife that could cut both sides of the market. He didn't stop. Instead, he tried to understand the cost. He scoured academic journals, old economic theories, and even whispered conversations in back valley cafes. The deeper he dug, the more he uncovered a forgotten principle. The market is a living memory. It posited that markets were not merely statistical aggregates, but social entities that remembered their past and responded to echoes of it. The algorithm, by tapping into that memory, had become a conduit between yesterday's echoes and today's decisions. Then the second twist arrived. A message from a new user, the Circle, appeared in the same forum. They claimed to have been watching Ethan's activity. They offer a partnership. We can amplify your gains and control the market's pulse. You do the coding, we provide capital. Ethan felt a cold surge of fear and temptation. He imagined a world where he could use the loop to free himself and perhaps others from the grind. Yet he also felt the weight of the earlier market dip, the ripple that hurt people he didn't know. The climax of Ethan's story came on a fog-shrouded evening. He was in his apartment, surrounded by screens, when his phone rang. It was a voice on the other end that was unrecognizable but unmistakably institutional. Ethan Sullivan, this is Marcus from Quant Global. We know about your system. We want to discuss a merger. The conversation was tense. Marcus presented a vision of a future where Ethan's algorithm would manage billions of dollars, preventing crashes, stabilizing economies, the price, a lifetime of obedience to a corporate machine. Ethan's heart beat against his ribs. He could either surrender the system to the world or shut it down, letting the loop close as he closed his accounts. He stared at the algorithm, at the code that had become a child in his hands, at the line of code that could bend the market to his will. He closed the laptop. His apartment seemed suddenly colder. The rain outside had turned into a steady drizzle. He stood by the window and thought about the loop. A perfect circle where past and future collided. Money, he realized, was just an illusion of value assigned by collective belief. Work was the human endeavor that sustained that belief. To wield the loop was to rewrite that belief, to give himself the power of a god, but also the burden of a tyrant. The thought hung in the air, unspoken. He could choose to keep the system, to let the market dance to his tune, or he could let it go, allowing the market to be a chaotic orchestra again, full of risk and reward. He had to decide if he wanted to be the composer or a humble player. Ethan turned away from the window and walked into his kitchen. He poured a cup of tea, watching the steam rise in thin spirals, each bubble a fleeting reminder of the impossibility of freezing time. He thought about the people he had helped and those he had hurt, about the debt that had almost been a prison, and about the freedom that could come with knowledge. He pressed the laptop shut. The algorithm, once bright and alluring, lay dormant, its code a silent sentinel. The future was still uncertain, but the past was no longer a mirror. He could stare into with reckless abandon. The loop, he realized, was a mirror with a hidden hand that could pull the world in any direction. He was no longer just an accountant. He was a guardian of a delicate balance. The city lights flickered as if they were trying to keep pace with his heart. Ethan sat back, the weight of the decision settling like a quiet aftershock. He didn't know if he had chosen the right path, but he knew that the act of choosing was part of what made the world move forward. He closed his eyes and whispered to the night, let the market find its own rhythm. The loop had opened, and now it was a question of whether it should close again. And in that silence, the city held its breath, waiting for the next ripple to spread.